Welcome to us right here on WFSB Plus. This is a special edition. First time I'm doing this with a couple of legends right here. Jim Calhoun is here with his new book out, Dom Memorial of the Hartford Courant, also a Hall of Famer. We got Hall of Famers all around us. And I'm just going to start right off the bat. More than a game, how the UConn basketball dynasty was built on a culture of caring. So that tells me it's not about X's and O's. It's a different way to go.
No, it's about people, and probably reflects a couple different things. A, we found out that some guy bought a baseball, the old baseball cards with the gum in it. We all remember those.
Of course.
And he looked up the 12, 14 players and then see what they were doing now, 15, 20 years out of the league. So I got the idea of doing this, ran it by Dom, and because Lee Montville told me, I'm not doing anymore, but you got a rake there, guy there, and that would be Dom. And we got this idea to see how our culture was built at UConn starting in 1986, and really kind of what the guys are more like than just guys that shoot jump shots. I like the jump shots, by the way, but if they go in. But I really thought to look inwardly of what it's like to be a major college basketball player or a high school player, and find out the wheres, the whys. Not everything's beautiful in it in the sense of life, but what it is, it's an inside look at a basketball team and basketball players going through one of the best times of their life and sometimes the most difficult time of their life.
Dom, is that what got you interested? It wasn't in other X's and O's. Not that there's anything wrong with X's and O's, no. Especially for somebody who knows X's and O's. But for you, it was a different way to go.
Well, yeah, I think that was important because Jim has already written his memoirs. He wrote Dare to Dream in 1999. He wrote a book about his philosophies on leadership, Born to Lead. He's already done that. So if we were going to do another book, at this point, I wanted it to be a story that he felt he still had in him that he hasn't told. And you know, he showed me the book he was talking about, the Wax Pack, and it was really good. But I thought that idea could really translate here, turning it the inside out, where it's Jim looking at the different players that he coached, different people that he impacted, and how he impacted them, and how their relationships have evolved over the years. And through that, tells the story of how the UConn culture was built, from Jim's background and the places he coached prior, into UConn, and how things kind of unfolded there. So I think the way of telling the story is Jim's concept of that really drew me into it.
What fascinates me is, and how hard this must have been for the both of you, which players do you pick? I mean, clearly there's a core group of guys everybody wants to know about, but then you went in a little deeper into the weeds. How did you pick the guys that you picked?
Very difficult. We could have picked 50 guys, but we tried to get a story. I'll use a mechanographer who isn't in the book. You know why? He was a Harvard book winner. He was a 4.0 student. He was an All-American. He was Rookie of the Year. And from an inspirational standpoint, that's great if you're 6'9", a genius and athletic. But we wanted to get guys to tell stories. The Mecca story is wonderful. One of my favorite people of all time. But we tried to get people to see that, it isn't always what you see. The culture is built behind the scenes. The teammates who ride on buses and spend so much time with each other are cultivated in a whole different sort of way. And I think an awful lot of people will be surprised when they read the book. And lastly, besides being surprised, a lot of young people should understand that it wasn't all sunshine and flowers for the kids. For a guy like Kemba Walker, one of the great players we ever had, he was cut from 2 teams when he was young, and then became an incredible basketball player. And I wanted people to see that it is more than a game, that it is a life, it's a culture. It is something that tells about the human spirit. I'd love a lot of young people to read it, and of course our fans, which are best in the country in my opinion, and still very biased about that, have an idea of what maybe some of these guys are like away from the lights.
We really wanted to toward that end, we really wanted to have a kind of a cross-section of the familiar names, the names that people would certainly expect to read about, the Ray Allens, the Rip Hamiltons, the Kemba Walkers, but we also wanted to mix in some of the players maybe people haven't heard of, like a high school player who went on to go to work for NASA. So literally a rocket scientist that Jim coached, or a kid at St. Joe's who really wanted to be a dentist. They told him pick something easier, and
Too tough.
And Jim encouraged him to be a dentist, and he pretty soon will be pulling teeth. So these are that we wanted that mix of. In order to get, we wanted to give people those big names that they certainly want to read about, and also while they're in there, get them to read about some of these other stories that haven't been told that are really worth telling and worth reading.
Yeah, well, back to your point, so I didn't have the opportunity to be here before 2006. So a lot of the guys in that book were just names to me.
Yeah.
So I start reading about them, and what's fascinating about the book is you're telling stories about people. Not necessarily a basketball team, but individuals, guys whose names I heard of, but their stories were interesting to me and how they got from here to here on the way to championships or not. And I think that was what you're trying to do with that book.
Yeah, without question. And they symbolize. The guys in the book, 15, 16 people in the book, definitely do it. My two sons have letters to me, one at 14 and one when he's in college. And they come up with the same conclusion about their dad. And I wanted people to understand this is a symbol of what our culture is all about, our family. And you've heard me say that 1,000 times over. I believe it's a family. When we see each other, Kemba Walker's wedding, and we're all together, I could tell you all the great stories about all these guys, but it's based upon a simple principle that I will listen to any play I have. Doesn't mean I'm going to change my mind all the time. What it means is I'm available to listen as long as you understand the values, because the values don't change. My standards didn't change, but you can be an integral part of making us very, very special.
I got one for you, but when you went to values don't change. Is that true in today's game? Are the things that worked when you coached, do those still work today with these kids and with this new environment?
Well, I am somewhat of a competitor, they tell me. And all I do know this much, that if I was coaching today, would I be doing the NIL? Of course I would. Would I like it? Of course I wouldn't, for a lot of different reasons. It's great that the kids are getting money. I think there's other ways to get that same thing done. With that, all that said, I love the game. I love the competition. And most importantly, beyond my family, I love the kids. They're my kids. And I remember telling this to an athletic director, if this kid's a jerk, you don't need to yell at him. He'll be my jerk, and I'll take care of it.
When you were going through the names in the book, did you have little disagreements on who should be in, who shouldn't be in, or did you have carte blanche with the way you wrote it?
Well, no, obviously the book is in Jim's voice,
Right.
so my job was to make it sound like Jim. And as far as disagreements, I mean, it's Jim's book, so I wanted it to be. He made any calls that had to be made. My job is to kind of execute it, and again to try to organize it and to kind of make the vision that he had, come out on paper. And that's all. But no, as far as disagreements go, whoever Jim wanted in the book, was going to be in the book. And to kind of speak to the other point that you made, I always go back to something Jim told me many, many years ago. You could say anything to a player as long as they know you care about them. They know it's coming from a good place. And I think you see that's kind of that's where Dan Hurley's power comes from. I think that's where Gino's power comes from, and that's where Jim's power comes from. He could cuss and he could be hard on players, but they accepted the hard coaching because they knew he cared about them. And that's where probably coaches that fail, that's probably the reason they fail.
And back to when I asked you about coaching today, it wasn't that long ago that you were coaching today, and your values and the things you believe in worked on a big-time level again later on when you went to St. Joe's, proving that it works.
I always tell them, I'm right now yelling at one of the best basketball players in America about something he did or didn't do, and getting to class on time, doing all the things you need to do to be successful. That's my job. And I try to put it into a 24-hour period. For 2.5 hours a day, I am going to kick your butt. I'm going to make you probably dislike me. Well, no, dislike me. And yet, understand for the next 22, I got your back. I'm a guy there. I lost my dad young. And when you do that, people appeared in my life that made a difference. It got me out of cutting stone for 2 years. I did put some weight on, got much stronger. That wasn't the good part. The good part, I went on to college and then got into coaching and fell in love with a sport that I love and fell in love with the basketball family at UConn.
But that lesson that you learned early when you lost your father, people who cared about you and helped you along, you applied that to your life immediately all the way up.
Well, they were so important. I have no idea what I would have done. I know I was bitter right away when you lose your dad at 15, and I happen to be a person who believes in God, and very simply, I wasn't crazy about God at that particular point in time, feeling that why could you take this man from this family of 6, 7, counting my mom, and my dad wouldn't have liked that. He would have wanted me to then stand up. He was a special guy and my hero in life, and my mother was incredible, and our family was really tight. I mean, like really tight, and I wanted to then expand that to a whole bunch of other guys who may have needed somebody there when tough times hit them.
Did you know right away, I think a lot of people who have 40 or 50-year careers, they knew day one or day two, this is what it was going to be. Did you know day one that coaching was what you were going to do?
After I like a lot of guys, I had free agency with the Celtics and so on. A guy named Bill Russell, I don't know if you might have heard of him, cut me, and I always told him the biggest mistake he ever made. It's a joke. I was a pretty good player, but it wasn't that level of player. And my coach came back and why don't we finish up here and then maybe start a master program. They call them grad assistants today. And I said I wouldn't be very good at it because I'd have to coach guys like me, tough, temperamental, stubborn. The moment I started to do it, I realized just as others had helped me, I could help others. And it was a gift that I could do that. And my position allowed me. It wasn't always perfect. It wasn't always 100% right, but it was always intended to make you get through a tough period in your life and to show you all the great things that are out there for you if you listen.
And there's one thing I know about kids. If you've done it, they listen a lot more than if you're just somebody telling them how to do it. You did it. You came up through the early ranks. You lost your father early. You're someone who did it. You're not telling them how. You already lived it. And I think kids respond to that.
Yeah, I really believe, I remember a veteran coach one time. He said, you know what you've earned recently? I said, no. He said, as you started winning up 15, 16 Big East championships, national championships, you got stripes. And just exactly what you said, Joe. They look at the stripes too. Like, I think sometimes they expect me to do this. I make you Kimber, I make you Ray. It doesn't happen that way. But I think they felt the power of the fact that people that I've been around and watched how they turned in college. And I think that allowed our family to grow very, very thick. The phone calls amongst our guys, when you see them together, I tell them all the time, kiddingly, but not so much, late at night, they're telling lies about me, lies about each other, embellishing on great things. And I watch and I'm this big smile inside because the family is together again.
Let's go back a little bit. Early days of the Big East, and I'll start with you, Dom. Did you think it was going to turn into the monster conference that it turned out to be in those early days?
Well, as I remember it, and I was obviously a very young sports writer then really starting, and I think one of the first things I did when I was an intern with the Shoreline newspapers back in, this must have been 1983, was go to a Big East media day at Madison Square Garden. And I remember walking down the street and seeing these two towering figures in front of me, and it was Patrick Ewing and John Thompson. I was like 21. And I remember being in that and seeing what a big deal it was. And then sometime after that, remember when ESPN used to invite the Connecticut writers over to watch the first 2 days of the tournament. So at that point, it wasn't so much, I started to get a feel for what college basketball was becoming at that point, what March Madness was becoming at that point. This would be the early 80s. And the Big East got on the train at the right time to kind of follow that. So yeah, I'm not surprised that the Big East became what it became. Was I certain that UConn was ever gonna rise to the top of it? I thought they could be competitive in it at some point. But it all just happened. Of course, when this guy came in, it all just happened like that. All of a sudden, that one year, Syracuse, St. John's, Georgetown, they all go down like dominoes, right all the way to the Garden. I can still remember Tate George dribbling out the clock at the Garden, and Brett Musburger saying, he might just dribble all the way to Denver.
That's right.
So. So no, I'm not surprised, but I'm surprised at the way it happened and the suddenness with which it happened for UConn.
When did you know that you were in a big time conference with big time coaches, big time players? When did it hit you?
Well, I knew from afar when I was coaching Northeastern, and the envy of everybody in the East was to be in the Big East. And I watched it, and I love Northeastern. My family's from Boston. I used to have large number of family people, 30, 40, come to a game. And very simply, somewhere along the line, the UConn job was offered to me because we went to the NCAA tournament quite a few times at Northeastern. And I'll get the chance, as it works out, to coach out of the 9 coaches, 6 are in the Hall of Fame. Unheard of.
Really?
Unheard of, and I don't think anything. Think of what the Southeast Conference is like in football. We were that version at that time in basketball.
And when you think about it, you guys are playing each other all season long, 2, 3, 4 times a year, knocking each other off, and still each one of you individually were able to accumulate fantastic success within the conference. And was that part of it because you were playing in such a good conference all the time that some of those other games that you were playing maybe weren't quite as brutal? And that's today's Big East, right, Dom? And
well, I remember, again, one of the first things that I covered involving Jim and UConn was the NIT in 1988. And, UConn was 15 and 14, I think. I think they were under 500 in the Big East Conference. They hadn't really arrived yet as a Big East contender, but they got they were one of the last teams picked for the NIT. And it was a loaded field. Ohio State had beat Ohio State to win it. And they just rolled through that conference. So they're playing in the old field house against Virginia Commonwealth, and the dust was coming down. Everybody thought everybody thought it was a dry ice show, right? But it was no, that was the real, to me, a real statement of how strong the Big East was then.
The genius was Dave Gavitt. God rest his soul. Dave Gavitt was maybe the smartest man. I've been fortunate enough to meet Bill Clinton, Obama, and talk to them, golf, a few things. But more importantly, Dave Gavitt was a visionary. He was a visionary in everything he did. And he saw by taking the Northeast at that time, putting neighbor against neighbor, that you could create something very special. And he did. And no one else had that idea all the time. Everybody was very colloquial about their league.
Right.
And then when you expanded, everybody wanted to play there. Yep. We had the big Mondays, right, and back-to-back games, and all the things that he touched. He was a special man who helped me a great deal, certainly. He told me after my first year, you got to calm down a little bit, and he said such a nice way. And so the next year, as Don alluded to, we go out and win the NIT. He said, I guess that calming down thing didn't really work out well for you. And that would be Dave, though, because he was a prince, and it was like anything else. You grew up in a neighborhood. The guys you want to beat are your neighborhood best buddies or your family. You want to beat them. Well, that's what it was like. All the kids knew each other. Right. It was great. It was in its own way. I think you'd agree, Don, a family itself.
It was, and when you think, it was like an Italian family on a Sunday with everybody. The thing about it, though, is that the way the new Big East has endured, the way the brand has endured, even though the league is not the same league that it was, but in a football-driven world, nobody gave this new Big East much of a chance in 2013, right. And yet it's still relevant. It's still producing national champions. Villanova, UConn, St. John's, obviously what they're doing. So it just kind of shows you the enduring strength of that brand and that idea of having, must-see basketball in the big markets up and down the East Coast.
Your book talks so much about kids' lives, high school kids. And what concerns me is in this new athletic world, not just basketball, high school kids are getting left behind in a lot of cases because of that transfer portal. And coaches can just go, boom, I'll take him. Boom, I'll take him. If we miss next year, boom, I'll take him. And relationships that you developed with kids, I find that is one of the biggest casualties of this new basketball world.
I had one and done, Andre Drummond, and he should have. He was 17 years old, and therefore the kind of money he was going to get was too good. I had another guy, 22 years old, Karan Butler. I said, Karan, you're not coming back next year. What? I was 22. And so, you're 22. There's no way I'm going to let you come back. You'll be losing money because the NBA wants young players. And this is exactly, Joe, right? Exactly where you're heading. I'm worried about the relationships. When I see, and I don't mind saying it, our kids, my kids, UConn's kids, I mean, it's so moving. I mean, we all grew up together. I grew up as a coach, as a man, as a father, and they grew up, you know, the group from boys to men. That's what happened. Yep. And the idea of losing that, to me, would be awful. Would I do NIL? I'd have to, so I would. Because one thing about me, I'm a pretty good competitor. And as I said before, but I think as much as anything else, we've got to find, and I don't know what it is, by the way, and I've thought a lot about it, I've talked to people about it, a solution to make the game again, and not who can buy the best players.
Yeah, but you know, I think it's important though to note that.
That's all right. It's somebody's phone, live TV.
It's not.
I know.
Me.
Don't worry about it.
Live TV.
It'll go to.
No, I think it's important to note that Dan Hurley, I think, has done a really good job of trying to maintain as much of that as is possible to maintain now. He's tried. He's fought to keep the program at UConn from being strictly transactional and players coming and going. He's had his transfers come in, but he's retained some players for 3 or 4 years. And he's built relationships with the transfers. You know, most of the transfers that leave UConn leave as UConn guys. You know, you mentioned Cam Spencer, you think UConn, right? You mentioned Tristan Newton, you forget that he ever played for East Carolina, he's UConn. So, of course, they won, that helps that. But he's a guy that's trying not to have a mercenary transactional program. And I think that's largely because of what Jim built. That's what UConn was and is and represents, is a program that's not a mercenary transactional program.
I think you know a little bit about the idea of us having the Calhoun Classic.
Of course.
3 days.
Played in it many times.
And that is, without question, one of the great times of all time. They come back for 3 days, staying down Mohegan Sun and played a couple of golf tournaments, and then late at night that all of us had lied to each other about how good they were and how Coach yelled and screamed more at them than them. Well, it's a contest. I yelled at them all. But the biggest thing is that I don't want that to be lost. The idea of going, I kiddingly said to one kid who had transferred 4 times, where does he go for homecoming? You know?
What uniform does he wear?
You know, I'm saying that facetiously, but I don't want it to lose. I was a young kid when my dad would take me to the Harvard-Yale game. That was special. The people there felt something to that. In basketball, at one time, Holy Cross and Boston College were incredible rivals. And we can down the line. I would love us to see a fix. The problem is I don't know what that fix is, and I've thought a lot about it. I just hope we can get back to some, quote, normalcy.
We're talking with Jim about his new book, More Than a Game. I know we're going long, but this is so fascinating for me. You mentioned Coach Hurley. He writes the foreword in your book, and I'm fascinated by the foreword and what he said in his, maybe it was a second or third meeting with you, but a meeting after he had a couple of rough days where he may have been a little down, complained a little bit about what he had walked into and what was going on, and you kind of said, you kind of set the record straight. What did you tell him?
Basically, without the language being the same, I would say grow up. You're at a big-time place now, and this is UConn, and we're supposed to win here, and you will win here. You're a terrific coach, but stop complaining. You mentioned to me about the weights. The weights wear out. I never knew that. I thought
5-year-old weights, so
yeah.
The weights wear out.
Weights are weights.
Yeah, I said it doesn't make any difference.
Tires,
Get players, the rest will take care of itself, and coach the way you're capable of coaching. Obviously, he's done a terrific job.
As we wrap up, I know you want young people to read this book. What advice would you give a young 17 or 18-year-old who's, they're going to get some money somewhere, and how to take care of that in themselves and keep their focus on what's, what their mission should be, which is, to be a teammate and win a championship maybe, but just play on a team. And how do you guide, what would you tell a young kid now?
Well, I'd go back to my premise of family. So I watched the Castle kid who became Rookie of the Year. He did nothing with anything, agents or anything else. All he did was play basketball and let his family handle those things. That's the best advice I could give anybody. Allow your family to handle it. You just play ball. You just be a great teammate. You enjoy the time you have here with your teammates. When, and Joe and Dom knows this because he's seen it, when they see each other, they are a brotherhood. And the closer you can get to that, as opposed to hit and run, I think we're going to be a heck of a lot better.
Because you're never going to have that again, right, Dom?
Right.
Kids are coming in for 2 years. I mean, we all know the kid who was, was in 1 year and got drafted this year, but I felt like I never got to know him.
Well, the thing is, you're only going to have it if a team wins. Like when and they go through the tournament and the parade and all of those things that UConn did, then you kind of have that. If a team gets knocked out early and everybody disperses, I think you kind of lose that. I really do. One thing I do want to mention, though, Joe, because you mentioned Dan's foreword, as people get to the end of the book, they're going to run across the afterword,
Yes.
which is written by another coach who's pretty hot at the moment, Mark Daignault, the coach of the world champion Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yep.
And he was a student manager for Jim at UConn. And he writes a terrific afterword talking about his time with UConn and with Jim and with George Blaney and what that did for him. And people, I don't want to give too much of that away, but when people get to the end, I think they're going to find a real treat there.
But think about that. I'm sorry, but if you believe it and you say to the book, it can happen. The guy's a student manager. Now he's...
No, he was a manager who's part of our family. And to get into the family, you just can't say, I want to be in the family. It don't work that way. That's poor English, but that's exactly what it is. You've got to earn your way there. And he more than earned his way there. He did everything humanly possible. And all of a sudden, by his junior year, he's working out players. And all of a sudden, I have him sitting there because he's a bright kid and wants to be a coach someday. And there's more and more stories about that. A lot of my managers, a lot of the kids were there. He's special, a lot of guys special. But when we say UConn family, we mean UConn family, and that's everybody.
And with that, I want to leave it more than a game. Believe me, you don't have to be a UConn fan to love this book. I missed the first 20 years of the greatness, and I read every single page of it and said, I didn't know that. Or it's out October, correct?
October's the full release date. I'm hoping we have some earlier than that, but you can pre-order it right now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Woodhall Press, a Connecticut-based publisher that's putting it out. You could go on their website. You can pre-order it now, and you'll get the first ones off the presses, hopefully a little early.
UConn fan or not, it's a great read. Guys, thanks for coming in. I took a lot of your time, but I love doing it, and I hope you guys enjoy as much as we did.
Really enjoyable. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah. By the way, I'm not in any halls of fame. I want to make that.
Well, if you're
I want to
not,
correct it.
that's on the people who vote for
I
it,
just
right?
I just want to put that out for the places I went to school in case.
In case they put it on their website. Gotcha.